This is your telepathic revolution leader, Justia. Um, and this video today is about how psychiatry is a totalitarian, science denying, covertly Christian religion usurping state power and creating an extra governmental theocratic cryptocracy. Theocracy, for those of you who are unlearned in it, is government ruled by religion. We have at least one in the Middle East, which is known as a Sharia state, where they institute or enforce Sharia law. And in America and everywhere else, we have it as well under psychiatry, which is not a science, it's a science denying religion, which denies the science of telepathy and other psychic phenomena, as well as the psychic race. It not only denies them genocidally because they're at a race war with them, but it also seeks to enslave them and monetize their torture and extermination. So, I'm going to start by prefacing that the counterpoint revolutionarily to the totalitarian system is usually, or rather ideally, politically and religiously Satanism. I am going to attempt to wake up the masses to the fact that democracy is not, especially in America, democracy is not democracy. Freedom isn't free. This is a covertly Christian, theocratic cryptocracy that we're living in which we don't have any rights. That's why abortion rights were taken away. Next thing on the Supreme Court is going to be gay marriage. Next thing you know, blacks will be being sold back into slavery. This is not a joke. America is racist against and xenophobic against anyone who is not male and white. And that is because the American government, as well as Nazi Germany, was based off of the Roman governmental system. And in Rome, it was basically a white man's paradise. I'm of mixed racial origins. I identify as white myself, largely or many aspects. And so this isn't a racially motivated critique on my part. These are just the facts that I'm giving you. This is the reality. In ancient Rome, you had something called the pater familias, and it was a law which made the head of the family the father. And when the father was the head of the family, he had ownership rights. Basically, he was a slave master of his family. That is the person he married into with the wife and the children that they have under them. I'll get into that a little bit more when I start talking about Christianity and filial piety, which is what you call a system of gerontocracy, which is what Christianity is. It's theocratic gerontocracy. Basically, politically, socially, that's the way that it expresses itself. And gerontocracy is rulership by parental authority, rulership by the elders, people that are older. Psychiatry is obviously a gerontocracy. When you look at how they vote for the DSM, everything like that. And I left out one for, again, cryptocracy. C, just like cryptocurrency, is a government that rules hidden, is a hidden government. Like you hear black budget and terms like that, shadow government thrown around. Well, that's what psychiatry is. Psychiatry is the shadow government. It is the black budget. And if you don't believe that, well, just look into military, CIA, etc., on, and their interest in experimentation in the mind control. And if you don't think that psychiatrists are on black budgets and work for this the shadow government, oh man, you really are not looking at things through the lens of truth. I could go on and on about that for hours. MK Ultra, for example, where you had psychiatrists contracted, I believe, by the CIA, and then you had mind control experiments with the Army, which I have videos already showing you that they had developed what they call psychochemical warfare agents, which are basically just psychiatric drugs. And so, to continue, like I was saying, the counterpoint is Satanism, other forms of government. There have been many attempts at revolution. One in Germany, it's called the SPK, or the Socialist Party, a socialist, I forget what SPK stands for, but it's a socialist party of ex-patients of psychiatry. I can link you to the book if I don't forget. We need something like that in America, like the SPK in Germany. They have a book called SPK - Turn Illness into a Weapon, because illness has been weaponized fraudulently. You being free will, free thought is not a mental illness. But the Roman paterfamilias, covert Christian theocracies of government rulership, of patriarchy, will tell you that it is. And it's called drapetomania. All mental illnesses in the DSM, because it's slavery, psychiatry is slavery, are forms of drapetomania. They're saying if you don't act like they want you to act, you don't think like they want to share the master's will, as they put it in slave times. If you're not an extension of your master's will, whether that be on the level of the family or not, or the level of the government and the parents patriae, which is the parent of the state, then you are to be punished, tortured, or exterminated. That's it in a nutshell. Another part of the counter critique to this is feminism. I know a lot of you probably immediately get a Pavlovian response to this and say, oh no, because patriarchy is the only way, and somewhere down there you believe that males are superior. But again, this is all ingrained and indoctrinated in you from Roman government systems, which are Christian. And Christianity and the Roman government are the same thing. This is why you have the Vatican as a sovereign state in Italy, where Christianity began. And then you have also Mussolini, who was the one who defined what fascism is for the first time, which is private and public government interest being shared. Psychiatry runs off of fascism. That's what it is. Psychiatrists are contracted all the time. They're basically subletted out, subcontracted mercenarily for governments to mind control and enslave populaces. That's what they are for. They are the black budget of slavery and mind control of citizenry. Um, Feminism. Now, there are at least two authors which talk about, and I have two books on them. One is by, let's see here. One is by a Rhonda Hammer, Anti-Feminism and Family Terrorism, feminist book. And then Full Surrogacy Now by Sophie Lewis. You can look those up at your leisure. But like I said, that is the counter. This is the critique. This is the socio-political and religious counter to psychiatry that we need to stand up for before the First Amendment is completely stripped away. Because it will be. Because this is totalitarian fascism, not democracy. And America is slowly, not slowly, now quickly, becoming a theocracy. And I think that is because this gerontocratic, theocratic cryptocracy is showing its head, its ugly head now, with all the things going on in the Supreme Court, because of global warming and the fact that the whole time the government sanctioned America and the entire world under psychiatry, under psychiatric state rulership, sanctioned all the dirty deeds of every government on the planet and enforced that, including creating the climate crisis. And it is the climate crisis is why they're truly showing their head now. The head in that psychiatry is the head, and it's showing itself. And if you don't believe that, you can look into the legal system and where federal law is headed. Look into the TAPS Act. It's called HR 808, I believe it is. 808. They're trying to vote on something called this act called the TAPS Act, TAPS Act, where basically you will be psychologically profiled for pre-crime and pre-diagnosis by psychiatry at a federal level. When psychiatry becomes a federal level program, it is officially usurped and overthrew. That has performed a full coup on any government which allows it to climb that high systematically. Because let me tell you right now, in America, psychiatrists are already socioeconomic, sociopolitically, judiciarily, they're gods. Okay? They're slave masters. The slave master god, same difference. Especially when you're looking into non-democratic, non-capitalist rather, types of political philosophy. They will write on it being this. And I'm going to get into that here now. As you see, Justamir Liu was a psychiatrist who wrote on totalitarianism and mind control and was a psychiatrist himself. And he called psychiatry mental rape, menticide, thought control, and brainwashing for the state. Thought reform, there's another psychiatrist calling it mind control, calling psychiatry mind control, and totalitarian. Not democratic. But the way that they get them is through their Christian morals. That's the way the Nazis worked too. Upwards of 90% of people in Germany when Nazism took over were Christian. This is how this works, and this is why history repeats itself in doing this. Here you have some counterpoints. For revolutionary abolition. See, this is what we need. Something like this. This is an organization which is based in New York. This is coming from the Anarchist Library. Burn Down the Psych Ward is the title. Call for an abolitionist approach to psychological emancipation. But the point, my point in this video is largely showing you that psychiatry is slavery. With a few of these references, you have irrefutable proof that it is. When I get some time, I will be making a documentary on how psychiatry is slavery and disseminating it through my church organization. Made exclusively for telepaths and people, unawakened telepaths who still call themselves by their slave terminology, which is voice hearer, or schizophrenic, which again, like, these terms are all under the umbrella of drapetomania. It is if you don't jive with the status quo, if you don't do what you're told, existentially, be their computational slave, their cybernetic slave, then you are these derogatory, pejorative terms, these slave labels they give you. You can look this up here for yourselves, and I will attempt to link it in the description as well. Surprised we're only at 17 minutes now. But I think I've prefaced it pretty well. But there's a couple points I want to show you. Not only have I shown you 3 psychiatrists who have also drawn comparisons between slavery and psychiatry through mind control. But like Thomas Zaz here, for example. But showing you also the legal apparatus behind which this is being done, and their true theocratic, moral belief and ethical belief systems behind these laws and these legal systems, which are the same ones that justified slavery, by the way. The same ones because they're based off of Roman law, like I was saying. Liberation by Oppression, a comparative study of slavery and psychiatry. This one was done all the way in 2002 by Thomas Zaz, another psychiatrist. And it really doesn't get any clearer than this. Liberation by Oppression. So, and this is his second or third book, I believe, and where he directly draws, but I think this is the most extensive and focused one, where he really just gets into it. Now, here's what I really wanted to talk about as well, is the fact that we live in a theocracy. Now, Mikhail Bakunin, I believe he was a communist or socialist, maybe anarchist. Definitely anarchist, but I can't remember if it's communist, socialist. Kind of rusty on that. But the thing is, he was basically a Satanist, or he advocated for, kind of like the Satanic Temple does, for a non-theistic, socio-political view of Satan, meaning political freedom and stuff like that, I believe, if I'm not wrong. Mikhail Bakunin, talks about God and the state. I want to talk about how the state is God. Many philosophers have talked about that, how the state is God now. Especially if you're living in a covertly Christian theocracy, and the concept of God in the Christian sense was created by men, and it's the same men who are ruling you, kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Germanic Empire, social revolution, treaty with small collection of passages representative of the primary themes of the book. God being everything, the real world and man are nothing. God being truth, justice, goodness, beauty, power, and life. Man is falsehood, iniquity, evil, ugliness, impotence, and death. God being master, man is the slave. Here we go again. While Satan is the eternal rebel, the first free thinker and the emancipator of worlds. This is what I'm talking about. This is true in so many senses, what he's saying here. This is the reality. And that's what my religion is about. It's about reality. It's not about, oh, what God you want to serve. So, well, I'm not going to get into that right away. But God is largely a delusion. The way that people perform it today, practice it in religions today, which are non-scientific, and don't take into account the self-awareness and consciousness of the being who is believing it or generating it, projecting it externally. And mental health, yeah, that's psychiatry, because I am quoting psychiatry, because for many different reasons, because there is science still done in psychiatry, and there are still right things about psychiatry, but psychiatry is being used and abused, same way Christianity is, to justify all of these dehumanizing, racist, and genocidal agendas and interests that men are sharing, men who are playing God. Yeah, I'm not going to get into this much in this video, but just quickly, God is a dissociative disorder. People who believe in God can be psychiatrically viewed as a couple different things. One is schizophrenic. One is OCD, that's obsessive compulsive disorder. There's a primate scientist who had mentioned that, who wrote volumes on that people's belief in God and Christianity is OCD. And then there is the perspective in psychiatry that belief in God is a dissociative disorder, like DID, dissociative identity disorder or disease, where self-agency is misunderstood and being misperceived and is delusional. So in other words, self-agency in meaning that you think God, or someone thinks God is responsible for certain things, like maybe like physics, interactions, the rising and falling of the sun, for example, and the stars at night, is all done by God. It's not physics. It's not a physical process. It's not scientific. It's superstitious. It's magical thinking is another way they term it. So very primitive senses saying the external world is controlled by God and God's mind or God's powers, which I'm totally fine with. But that's not what they're doing in Christianity. That's not what they're doing in the world's major religions. That's not what they're actually doing. They're actually just brainwashing people moralistically, to behave in a certain manner and how they want is beneficial to them. And ironically, getting them to be worshipped like gods, and themselves to be worshipped like gods. Now, my religion, we can worship God as a psychic phenomena and study and research how that is and how we are part of God. And again, like I said, study and research how that is, which a lot of these things have been theorized and hypothesized and damn near proven in quantum physics and different fields of research, as well as in different religions, Enlightenment religions. See, because Christianity, or at least its status quo populist version of Christianity, is not an Enlightenment religion. Okay, whenever a system tells you how to think and then tortures and murders you when you don't comply ritualistically, is not in my opinion a trustworthy system, whether it be a political system of governance or a religion. And those two used to be one and the same. But to continue, the liberty of man consists solely in this, that he obeys natural laws because he has himself recognized them as such. Science is the compass of life, but it is not life itself. What I preach then is, to a certain extent, the revolt of life against science, or rather against the government of science. Not to destroy science, that would be high treason to humanity, but to remand it to its place so that it can never leave it again. You see, to me, this is the perfect political and religious ideology right here, Mikhail Bakunin. I'm going to have to quote this time and time again for my own purposes, because this is excellent. I mean, I couldn't even said it better myself. This is basically what I believe the religion should stand for. Very close to what the Satanic Temple already does. And here it talks about Board DU or someone, where he talks about the state as God. Yeah, man must also be slaves of God. Men must also be slaves of church and state, insofar as the state is consecrated. Oh, Hegel, getting into Hegelian, this is perfect. The state is God's will. The state then is a supreme manifestation and activity of God in the world. And the state stands above all. So you see here that the state itself is schizophrenic and schizophrenogenic and dissociative, because it's a theocracy. It's telling you that God exists and that it is God, or it's an extension of God's will, which is what, in the Vatican, what the Pope says he is. He's a stand-in for God. And that is a sovereign state there. So we're looking at the same thing. State in church and state used to not be separate. They used to be the same thing. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a repetition in history of this. Especially in America today, with all the transphobia, homophobia, racism, and such being instituted into law. A doctrine that grants the inherent power and authority of the state to protect persons who are legally unable to act on their own behalf. Now, that judgment is not absolute, and that's the problem. Parent of the country, parents patriae. This is where the laws of slavery come about and come from. Parents patriae, I believe is the Latin. So this is based again on the Roman governmental states. The parens patriae also exist in English common law, which most of American law is based off of. Checkered career of the parent. The state as parent or tyrant, right? Purpose versus power. Parents patriae and agency, self-interest. You see, it talks about self-agency, autonomy and self-agency, which we don't have under a parents patriae. That's going to tell us when we are and when we're not competent of the law and the rules and all like this, and to follow them. That's slavery, telling me I have to do this, that, and the other. And I understand that means that I am aligning myself politically more with anarchism, and this is true. But you see, the thing about religion is religion supersedes right now in America under the First Amendment and in many different legal systems all throughout the world, supersedes the state. So it can be its own form of governance, its own form of law, so forth and such like that. So it doesn't mean being anarchist against a country that is basically theocratic and cryptocratic and guarantocratic and all these things that are violating not only your religious rights and your religious views, but also violating their own standards and laws by forcing their own religion onto you through their laws, through their parents' patriarch, calling you incompetent, calling you this, gaslighting you, calling you psychotic, and all these different diagnoses of drapetomania, which is, sorry for using that term for this long and not telling you what it is for those who don't know. Drapetomania is runaway slave syndrome. So I'm not doing this perfectly. I'm kind of just doing this at at the seat of my pants. But I'm getting into why psychiatry is slavery. Okay. The parents' patriae is also, as you see here, authority to protect persons who are legally unable. They're the ones who control slavery. They control guardianships, conservatorships through usually what we call in certain states is the probate court. Again, this is a Christian ritual. The ritual of filial piety, which filial just means like familial, related to the family. This is Christian gerontocracy. It's putting the needs of the parents over the self, spouse, and children. We believe primary loyalty belongs to spouse. A man shall something blah 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 yada yada yada. I'm not going to click on these because I need to be able to go back for my purposes. The fifth commandment states that one should honor one's mother and father. Again, and this has been written theocratically into law. Even on the American dollar, we have "In God We Trust." Filial piety, Christian perspective, centers on God, originates from God, and is for God. Right. So the reason behind why you obey your parents and everything like that is not because it's the law, even though through psychiatry they're instituting it and enforcing it as the law by gaslighting you and allowing your parents to abuse you and the state to abuse you simultaneously because they share interest in abusing you and enslaving you. These are just facts. That's what patriarchy is. It's a fact because in 1899 was when America made child labor, which labor is just a word, and having a job, yes, I know, shocker. It's a double speak Orwellian term because Psychiatry is totalitarian for slavery. It's what you call in mind control a term or a word that is a softener. A softener is a word you use in place of the word that directly tells you and relates to what you're talking about. So it'd be like if someone got stabbed or something, right? And it was a traumatic incident, and that person didn't want to relive it or whatever like that. So they used another word. I got patted. That's a softener. Padded is a softener. There's an example. So the state is theocratic, and the Roman state, by the way, was theocratic. The gods, there was no separation between church and state at the time. The Roman religion and the Roman laws were one and the same. And so when you take Roman laws and incorporated them into your own government, and then you have mostly Christians in place, positions of power, ruling your government, like you do in America, like you did in Nazi Germany, you see what you have. You have totalitarian theocracy, covert Christian theocracy, because it's coming from the same place. Drapetomania, here we are. This is what all mental illnesses are, by the way. This shows you point blank. Enslaved blacks run away from bondage before this, that it's a disorder or disease that caused black slaves to run away. Okay, before the Civil War. And this is closely linked to Benjamin Rush, who around the same time frame. By the way, a lot of this stuff was going on before, while child slavery was still going on in America. You even had child prostitution that CBS made, and I talked about this in my previous video, made a television series where they talked. Well, the premise of it was about child prostitution and how psychiatrists, I don't know if this is true or not, which were called alienists at the time, were investigating it for criminal value or whatever like that. Like if it, I can't even. It's so bizarre. But this is human history, and this is the history of psychiatry. I know it's a touchy subject, but yes, child slavery, child prostitution. It's pretty obvious that we don't want these things, or most Christians wouldn't want these things. It would be against their religious views, right? So we're seeing the state being very hypocritical, very contradictory in itself, where it's convenient for them, right? I know it's hard to face for some people, but these are the facts. I mean, and America's not the only one guilty of child slavery, child prostitution, even to this day. But what I was getting sidetracked. Benjamin Rush, the founder of biological psychiatry, the first one to say that, who was a Christian, by the way, staunch Christian and a child slave owner. So not only was he enslaving a child, he was also enslaving a black person at that time. So it was both in one. And so, anyways, Benjamin Rush, invented the disease at the same time around the same time, he invented biological psychiatry. He invented the disease of negritude, which is where black skin is a symptom of a disease. Black skin is a disease. That's what negritude is and what it means. So when you're following biopsychiatry, you're talking about before, you're talking about a time where the humoral concept of medicine still existed. That's where this comes from. And when slavery was normal, both of children and whoever else as a captive of warfare or whatever the circumstance may be. That's what you're dealing with when you're believing in psychiatry. You're believing in the hype and the propaganda of psychiatry, and that's real, and it fits into a Christian moralist viewpoint and everything like this. It does to the sense that it's totalitarian. Yeah, if you want to be Christian and you want everyone else to be Christian, you want to convert everyone and go on a crusade through your all backed and sanctioned by your own government, then yeah, it's totally fine. And that's what a lot of Americans, or at least we're being told by the media that it's a lot of Americans want this. Which, if so, again, it's turning more and more into a theocracy. But to continue, as I was saying, this is where the probate court, as the extension of the parens patriae, the parent of the country, enslaved black people, made them chattel property in the probate court. It's the same place where guardianships go on. Right now, I am even under guardianship based on psychiatric fraud, and racism and genocide. And I'm sure many people who should be listening to this right now and probably won't get access to it for many different reasons are as well. Because you have been called incompetent. Being called incompetent, being under guardianship, and there are many attorneys which can attest to this, under the probate court is the same system of slavery. The parens patriae is there for people who cannot take care of themselves. Black Africans who were treated as property were said to not be able to take care of themselves. That's a loaded, vague term. They can't take care. Yeah, they could. When they were released from captivity back into the wild, where they were taking care of themselves on their own with their own race, right? Before they were captured by a different race, in a race war which history never admits to, completely covers up. So psychiatry is literally a conspiracy to enslave not only the black African race, but the white race as well. Because here's the funny thing about that, is that everyone that considers themselves white today and they just say, look at their skin and, oh, their skin is white, that wasn't what white was back in the old days. In the old days, when it was white, you had to be part German and you had to be Protestant. That's what it meant to be white. The eugenicists and the scientific racists had made criteria for what white was. And it's all based on Christianity, not science. It's just like, ironically, with the Jews and with the Indian Sikhs, where their religion was tied to their ethnicity. Their ethnic origins were tied to their religion. The Hindu Sikhs, S-I-K-H. That's what it was to be white. What they call Anglo-Germanic and Protestant. Now, so the Irish weren't white. The Italians weren't white. Get that. You can look this up if this is new to you. They suffered discrimination in Ellis Island. It's not a joke. So this is all a system of slavery for these people, the governments of the world under psychiatry. This is what psychiatry was invented for. Psychiatry was invented to create drapetomania. And all the other diagnoses were forms of drapetomania already, which is why they never officially instituted it, because it would be too obvious. And then if they know, the citizens would know, when you're combating psychiatry, you're combating your own slavery and the slavery of others. That simply. And they would put their cards on the table, and they'd offer themselves up on a silver platter. Okay, technically. To be attacked by democracy, if democracy were ever to truly rule in this country of America or anywhere on the planet. That's why. So when I'm trying to convince you that, okay, psychiatry is slavery, just remember that. Remember that. Because in order to win this, we have to get everyone on the same page as knowing that this is factual, that psychiatry is a conspiracy of slavery. It is not a pro-government, it's an anti-government form of government, which is totalitarian and religious. And that religion used to rear its head as white supremacy. Now it just rears its head as non-psychic supremacy and any other form intersectionally of discrimination. Because it's mercenarism. It's mercenary discrimination. It's mercenary oppression. It's mercenary genocide. Mercenary slavery. Anyone with social status above yours has qualms with you. They are allowed to contract psychiatrists via the government, by proxy the government, to exterminate you. It's that simple. If you do not comply with their wishes, with the person that has identified you and hired that psychiatrist through the government. Government contracts psychiatrists, like I said. But they're not the government. When the government contracts a psychiatrist, they're performing an extrajudicial, fascistic, totalitarian act. That's what they're doing, because it's not written in the Constitution. Psychiatry is not written into any, and they always backpedal to, oh, well, it's scientific. Well, there's no government on the planet which says that science rules and is the rule of law. There's no scientocracy on the planet. And so you see the irony and the hypocrisy that a place like the Middle East can have Sharia law and institute psychiatry still, and still pay people for psychiatry. Because how is their religion in line with psychiatry? What a joke. It's literally scientific racism created for white men that are trying to enslave all non-white people on the planet. That's literally the conspiracy. How is China in their social credit system, right, contracting psychiatrists if it's not a scientocracy? You see, because all these governments in the world, they're all making deals with the devil because they're doing two things at once. They're serving two masters, as the Christians say. They're telling me that the government is a theocracy, right? It's moral and ethical in a religious sense, and at the same time they're saying that it's scientific. That's what psychiatry is, the culmination of that with Christianity. It's the fraudulent scientificalization of Christian theocracy. It's justifying Christianity with fraudulent science. It's saying you follow the law because God is science, and God is scientific. You follow me. Why? Because it's totalitarian. It's authoritarian. It's because they say it is. and then we don't argue it at all. They can argue creationism, and they will and are in schools, arguing against evolution, arguing against science, but yet hypocritically at the same time, psychiatry is somehow science, right? Psychiatry is science, but in Christianity is science, but evolution isn't. Look up the anti-evolution movement in the 1920s, which was largely racist as well. So I'm showing you my intention here is to show you where systemically and intersectionally where make sure to drink water. Racism is inculcated, all forms of discrimination of all so-called minorities are inculcated, and particularly what's being overlooked, covered up, is the psychiatric genocide of the psychic race. That is, people who they call schizophrenic, people who they call voice hearers, because they're telepathic. We need to add, and I will work to do this, add to feminist critiques, intersectional sociological critiques, telepaths, psychics, because we are being discriminated first and foremost. This is where all the revenue is coming from, because it's harder for a psychiatrist to blatantly discriminate against a black person, to blatantly discriminate against a trans person, a homosexual person, so on and so forth. But it's easy because it's so existential and it's so seemingly subjective, but it's not, that people are telepathic, and that is a racial, just as much as, it is within the context of a religion, where you have Jewish people, right? Or you have the Hindu Sikhs. So, and then, like I described, those Protestant white people. It's the same difference. And that my religion is that religion. It's the religion of the psychic race. Which, if you are psychic or you are telepathic and you identify as that, then you are part of my religion. I accept you as part of my religion, whether you do or not. I'm telling you that is the same thing. And if you were to make it actionable and mobilize yourself, you could argue that point, because it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You being telepathic means you have a certain identity, which is racial, through my religion, is what I'm telling you. Because I take that as the way I view it, the way I perceive it, is that is a race. And we don't know the factors, whether they be genetic or otherwise, that makes a person telepathic or makes a person psychic. And we may never know. But in that interim, we can at least mobilize ourselves and show some solidarity and unite ourselves under the same flag. Okay? I'm talking about a revolution. I'm talking about making a nation of psychics who identify themselves as psychics, as a race, and as a religion. And to abolish psychiatric rulership over us as sovereigns of our own selves, as our own self-agents. okay, is the ultimate goal. To possibly even succeed, and to start, we must segregate ourselves, because as I showed you in my previous video, they're already segregating us. They're already targeting us. So we need to gather together. Again, like I said, under this religion. Don't get caught up in it being me. I'm attempting to be as selfless.
Recalibrate socio-scan.
Attempting to be as selfless as possible in doing this. To be as transparent as well, so that this is not taken as any other religious cult or religion that has came before it. Because this would be, I believe, would be the only scientific, I call it agnotological, damn near. Look into agnotology if you don't know what that is. But because it's scientific. Scientific religion, like I said, it's the religion of reality. Right now on this channel, I'm calling it Telepath Refuge, but it has many different names, and I'm working on the name, working on a working title. I just need those out there that understand what I'm saying and see what I'm trying to do to network with me, because I can't do this alone. I can only do so much alone, rather. So yeah, we're coming up to an hour on this video, and I'll be wrapping up soon. But yeah, this last article that's on here, I kind of was trying to draw some understanding scientifically between how oxytocin basically is responsible for all oppression and forms of slavery on the planet, to some extent, because there's a lot of research that shows that oxytocin mediates ethnocentrism. There's another term for racism. And in-crowding, and then putting others in the out crowd, fitting in, and then making the crowd not, another crowd not fit in based upon that. So yeah, which is apparently, oxytocin is apparently the love hormone, quote unquote, or the social bonding hormone. But with normal humans, the only bonds I see in history seem to be traumatic ones. And trauma bonding is the stuff of psychiatry. It's the stuff of slavery. It's what perpetuates slavery, is trauma bonding. We have a lot of telepaths out there that are being called schizophrenic because human beings who are not psychic are abusing them, and they're putting them in situations of abuse in which they're abusing telepaths and attacking them psychically, incessantly, day in and day out, especially in America, because it's just a cesspool of human hatred and slavery. But I'll end it there, as I know this is pretty heavy stuff. And this is for those of you out there that are serious about abolishing psychiatry, and also being part of a revolution, possibly anarchic, at first, and then taking form in a new form of government, or our own nation. Like I said, this has been Justia, Justia. Alrighty, take care.